Hi, everyone, and welcome to the show. From Petersons, I'm your host, Taylor Sienkiewicz, and you're listening to You Have a Cool Job, a podcast highlighting those who took their profession in a unique direction and what they did to get there. On this week's episode of You Have a Cool Job, we talked to Justin Matott, author of books with titles like I Think My Dog Might Be a Nerd, There's a Fly on My Toast, and Ol Lady Grizelda. He speaks to students about bullying and works with them on their creative writing. His student speaking gigs have earned him his fair share of media attention. With all this in mind, I asked Justin if he considers himself first an author or a speaker.
I would say an author, and my speaking comes from it. My opportunities to speak come from being an author, like school visits, and I speak to a lot of MOPS groups and different organizations, and Charles Schwab and some corporations on my corporate stuff.
Okay, but you're mostly speaking to children, correct?
Yeah, my assemblies and workshops are generally up to middle school.
Okay. So, Justin, where do you get your inspiration for these books? I know you do both picture books and shorter chapter books, but where does that come from?
I'm just one of those people that has an crazy imagination, and I see things often that my friends are like, how did you see that looking at that? And it's just the way the brain works. And I guess over 20 years of writing books, I haven't trained my brain has trained me to just kind of imagine variables for regular things in life.
Right. And what sparked that interest for you? Like, how did you come up with your first book or something like that?
My first couple of books were published by Random House for adults, and having children of my own, my wife would bring stacks of books home for me to read with the boys at bedtime. And quite often, I was a little bit disenchanted with either the illustrations or the stories, there were some that were just absolutely awesome, and we would usually read those several times, but I made the comment to my son several times, I think I could write a better book than this, and finally one of my sons said to me, well, Dad, you say that all the time, why don't you just write the book and stop talking about it? And I thought, oh, okay. So there was this little old lady that, I grew up in a country neighborhood, and there was a little old lady that terrified me when I was a boy because of all the rumors I heard about her. And my dad forced me to go up and meet her. And when I met her, I found out that she was actually really pretty awesome and became kind of a grandma character to me. And I would tell my boys stories about her, scary stories, funny stories, gross stories, and they just loved her character. So I decided to write my first picture book about her for my boys, and that ended up being a rather large selling book. So that was the first book that I wrote for kids, and then from that point on, my imagination just sparked to continue to write those crazy stories for people of all ages, really.
Mm-hmm. And so does that kind of appeal to that younger boy humor usually?
Yeah, I definitely write. My chapter books are very informed by boy humor. And the funny thing is most of my emails and letters come from girls who really enjoy them because boys don't like to write, apparently. But my books are for all people, but I definitely, it's informed by the fact that I was a boy and kind of a crazy kid. So a lot of the adventures we had when I was a boy have turned up in my chapter books.
So I know about your anti-bullying work, and a lot of it was based on that book, I Think My Dog Is a Nerd. Can you tell me about that process and inspiration?
Well, I had everyone has experiences with bullies in their lives, whether it's when you're a kid or when you're an adult. There's just bullies everywhere. And so what I've learned to inform kids and teachers when I go to schools is kind of a different way of looking at it. I don't focus on the bully. I focus on personal power. And a bully requires power from other people to bully them. And if a bully comes up, and I always tell kids, if a bully comes up and calls you a nerd, basically they're complimenting you. They just don't know it because they're not smart like you. Because a nerd just means that you're super smart. And so just embrace who you are and don't let a bully bother you. And after a while, the bully's going to get bored with you and turn to another victim or just leave you alone. And so my chapter book series, I have a 6-book series told by and narrated by the main character who starts in 4th grade narrating it and grows to 8th grade in the series. And he's bullied in the first book in the same manner I was in 4th grade, and just turns it around with a sense of humor. And, all of a sudden the bullies think he's kind of cool because he's funny. And so what I try to do is I just try to have kids find their resource of their own personal power, regardless of what it is. Don't let a bully steal that from you.
Mm-hmm. Was that book series kind of what sparked a lot of these school visits where you were talking to kids?
Yeah, I'd never really expected to have a big platform for anti-bullying, even though I'm against it. It just kind of happened that, teachers kept saying, that story that you told today made such a difference in our school. You need to continue to tell stories like that first person, because, you call yourself a nerd, but the kids think you're really cool. So they love the fact that you think you're a nerd and they think you're cool. They find out nerds can be cool. Mm-hmm. So I don't know what's nerdier than a writer, but we sit around with a pencil and a piece of paper and create worlds that don't exist. I guess that's not totally nerdy. It's kind of cool.
Yeah. Do you think that's maybe why it's effective? Is you're being relatable to these kids?
Absolutely. I think one of the big, I've done a lot of research about bullying. I've worked with a lot of counselors, and one of the interesting things that happens in our society is that it's changing a lot now, but the generation prior was kind of raised to keep all your feelings stuffed in, and so a lot of dads weren't talking to their kids about their own experiences of being bullied because they didn't want to be vulnerable or, whatever their reasons are. And so the kid doesn't feel the safety to say, well, my dad experienced this and he's cool. And so I always encourage, when I do evening events at schools, I encourage the families to share their own personal stories because, your kids are going to listen to you. They may not act like they're listening, but they'll definitely hear what you're saying. And sharing how you overcame those kind of issues is a lot more effective than anybody else telling them that.
Do you get to see the impact on these students ever?
I do. I had just a recent experience that was really pretty awesome. Generally, I'm invited back to schools, and I went to a school years ago that I just visited several weeks ago, and I had an experience. It was probably, I want to say, 10 to 12 years ago in this school, where I was sharing a story about bullying, and this boy in the audience started laughing. And laughing like uproariously, so much so that it distracted me. And I just stopped and I said, do you think that's funny? And he just kind of nervously looked at me and said, yeah. And I said, you think it's funny that I was being bullied by 3 kids? And he just nervously started laughing. And so I just said, well, it's not really that funny when it's you. And then I just kind of turned away and just continued with my assembly. So during lunch, a teacher and a counselor came into the teacher's lounge where I was sitting, and they said, the young man that interrupted your assembly today, we would like him to come in and talk to you if that'd be okay with you. And I said, sure, what do you want me to talk to him about? And they said, well, he first of all needs to apologize to you, but his response wasn't probably what you thought it was, and I think he probably could really use just a conversation with you. I said, sure, send him in. So this kid comes in and he sits in the teacher's lounge with me, and we just start talking. And because I'm a dad and I'm a dad of boys, I realized, he's just a little boy, he's, 5th grade boy, and I just started talking to him and asking him, so why was that funny? And anyway, we had this long conversation, and at the end of the conversation, I said, well, you seem like a really neat kid to me, and I know you didn't mean to be disrespectful, and just consider us friends. And he was like, okay, that's awesome. So he went, left the teacher's lounge, and I left the school, and, it was just another encounter with a kid for me because I have encounters with kids all the time. So last summer, I was signing books at this farmer's market over near where the school is. And I was talking to a family, and this very large bearded man walked up and was just standing there listening to me talking to this family. And I could tell he was really intently listening. And when the family left, he said, well, I finally get to meet my hero. And I said, what? And he said, yeah, I finally get to meet my real hero. And I said, why am I your real hero? He He goes, well, you probably don't remember me, and he was this kid in the teacher's lounge. And I said, oh my gosh, dude, you didn't have a beard and you weren't 6'4" then.
Yeah.
And he was like, yeah, I know. He said, well, the day that we met was one of the hardest mornings probably of my whole elementary school, because my stepfather beat me up and beat my mom up that day. And I just had a response to your story because I was a kid that was getting beat up too, and I didn't want anybody at school to know that. And but you really changed my whole life that day, because it was the first time I ever told the counselors and my teacher what was going on at home. And as a result of that, this terrible stepfather was taken out of my life. And in the military, and he's just done all kinds of things for young people and used his own experiences. So, I mean, from just one little experience at a school, this guy comes out, triumphantly able to have a better life, as did his mom. So anyway, that's just one example of stories that I get to hear, and sometimes a long time after. You never know what impact you're leaving in a school.
We'll get back to Justin's story right after this. Are you searching for the right college, grad school, or trade school to fit your needs? Or are you studying for those entrance exams you need a good score on? Petersons has you covered. With advanced college and scholarship search functions, test prep for everything from the SAT to the MCAT to the firefighter exams, and tons of free resources on our blog, Petersons helps you find, get in, and pay for school, plus much more. Visit petersons.com today. Now, back to the show. The story of the little boy that was able to get out of a bad situation and grew up to help others is just one impact Justin was able to inspire in a student. But he shared other reasons why he loves working with kids and why he's done this now for over 20 years.
The thing that's really fun for me is I do creative writing workshops after I do an assembly. And my assemblies are, depending on the age of the students, my assemblies are humorous and thought-provoking. And, when I weave in the bullying story, it has an impact on bullies and kids that are bullied alike, as well as the kids that aren't really part of that whole culture. And so the kids just kind of have it's interesting because when you have a microphone and you stand in front of kids, for some reason there's a celebrity attached to that. So they kind of revere what you're doing up there. And so then when they come into a writing workshop, they're not generally coming in begrudgingly. They're coming in excited to see what's going to happen now, because they know you're safe. They know you're fun. I'm a happy person. I'm friendly. I'm kind of like a big fourth grader. And so when they come into the writing session, they're really eager and ready. And I've had so many teachers say, that boy has never wanted to pick up a pencil. And all he keeps telling me after your visit was, oh, I want to write another story. I want to write another story. And for me, I design the story with the kids, and it's really their story. They give me the who, the where, the when, the what, and the why that we write a story about. So they get to come up with the subjects, and fourth, fifth grade boys, third grade boys, and girls, but mostly boys, really love to go to scatological and gross things. And I don't prevent them because it's a creative writing workshop. So, if they want to throw a body function in there, then it's fine, because they're not going to do that every day in school. And that just gives them that safe, environment of, this is really fun. And so for me, it's really fun because every single creative writing workshop I do with them is different for me too. It's not boring because their characters and settings inform the story that I write. And then I always, at the end of it, I give them a little 10-minute exercise to do. And while they're doing that, I write a full page or two of rhyming verse to what they've written. And how did you do that so fast? Well, it's like anything. If you practice, you're going to get better at it. And that's encouraging to them. But, it's just a lot of fun to watch kids' imaginations grow and come alive in a world where teachers feel like, they're teaching children to the test instead of teaching the child.
Mm-hmm. Right. I bet they have some really creative ideas every day.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I mean, it's mind blowing. I mean, there's times where I just want to steal their ideas for a book because it's so funny, or, kids are amazing. They're imaginative if they're allowed to be.
Yeah. Did a kid ever inspire any of your books?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. I have a book that's now out of print called Drinking Fountain Joe, and it's about a kid that's paranoid about germs on the drinking fountain. And it was a kid in a classroom that had a drinking fountain, and he must have gone over there and he probably got 20 drinks in the course of 1 hour of my teaching him. And at the end, I said, "Man, you're really thirsty." But I noticed the whole time he would stand very, very far away from it, and he would use his elbow to turn it on. And what? You got a really interesting technique of drinking. And he said, "Yeah, I don't like it because there's germs all over it. So why don't you get a water bottle?" Anyway, yeah. I wrote this story, based on this funny kid. And the cool thing about that was after the book published, I went back to that school, and the kid was now in 6th grade, and he found out that, he had inspired this book and kind of became a little hero that year at the school. And he was a kid that really needed it.
Yeah. So he liked the book then too?
Oh, yeah. He thought it was totally cool. He asked me if he could autograph it.
Oh, awesome. So, Justin, what were you doing before you got into being a child author or children's author?
I worked for a Fortune 500 company, and I was in corporate sales and traveling a lot. And I kept hearing over and over from my clients whenever we'd have lunch or something, they'd say, "Man, why don't you do something with your stories, man? Your stories always crack me up. I just love going to lunch because they're so funny." And and they just kept encouraging me to do that. And I finally just started listening and, kind of harkened back to my 2 English professor parents who had told me that my whole life, that I had a gift that I should use. And I was using it. I just wasn't using it as a full-time occupation.
Mm-hmm. So, and then your kids kind of encouraged you to start writing your first book, and it just took off from there?
Well, my first book, I wrote from very, very personal experiences, and it wasn't a book that I ever intended to write for anyone else. I had a tragedy in my life when I was in my late 20s. My mom died, and just an amazing human being. And she just poured herself into me, and she adopted me when she was 40. And not just she, my mom and dad adopted me, but she was just such a dynamic human being. And when we lost her, I was just devastated. And the first thing I did, because I'm an avid reader, is I went down to the tattered cover, and I was looking for a book that would help me to understand, what do I do now? And I couldn't find anything. I just couldn't find anything that was appealing to me. And so I just started journaling, and pretty soon the journaling turned into a story, turned into a book, and then that was the first book that I had picked up by Random House. And then a sequel to it came out, and that started my writing career. And then while all that was going on, the birth of the idea of a book called Ol Lady Grizelda came, and that was my first children's book.
In the wake of Justin's tragic experience and his way of using writing as an outlet, Justin's writing career began. He said he now feels like he is doing what he was meant to do.
I'm of the mindset that God gives people very specific gifts, and then really kind of requires us to use them. And I definitely am in the place I'm supposed to be in, and I'm excited to see what the next chapter of it is, because I have some other things that are coming out of it now. And that's the cool thing. When I first saw, that your blog was, you have a cool job. I really do have a very cool job. Mm-hmm. Because I have a job where I'm my own boss. Like I had a meeting with my boss this morning and said, the powder is really good in the mountains. You ought to go skiing tomorrow. And I agreed with my boss, so I'm going. And it's just a cool job.
Justin also talked about writing for both children and parents, and encourages parents to foster creativity.
When I sit down to write a book, I write it for 2 audiences. And the first audience is for the child. But the second audience, which is just as important, is to the adult that's going to be reading with the child. Because one of the reasons I started writing children's books was I wasn't very enamored with a lot of the books that we were reading, and I thought they could be better. And a lot of that was because it didn't have humor that adults enjoy. It didn't have it just didn't have the complexity that I think a book can have. And I think, as a result of my career, I've done so many writing workshops and different breakouts with parents and kids, and they'll talk about their children's just insistence to tell them stories, or just their insistence to draw pictures. And I just say, you have no idea what kind of a gift that child probably has, and they're looking to you to foster that gift and to tell them that it's a worthy thing to pursue. If your child is just insistently telling you stories, there's probably something beyond just they want attention. Probably have a gift that just needs to come out.
Stay tuned for Justin's chapter book series that he's currently working on and the comic book spin-off to his 6-book series. We hope you're inspired by Justin's story to share your unique skills with the world, too. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next week.